Hey friends, different places we've lived in have rarely ever had good bread except for in America. Maybe it's just an acquired taste, maybe it's just a preferred taste, but whatever it is, I'm really grateful for good bread that you can get in America, except for when we're having an international pandemic and bread might be hard to find. And then I'm really grateful that I have a storage of yeast. And if I don't have that, then I'm really grateful I have a sourdough starter, which I can show you another time. But today I'd like to show you how to make a whole wheat bread that you might enjoy. When I'm making homemade bread, I prefer to use a mixer. I did it without a mixer for years and that was just fine, but I find I get such a better gluten content when I use a mixer than when I don't. For our bread, we're going to have 3 cups of warmed up water. And I've just warmed it up for about like 1 minute in my microwave. And then I'm going to take 1.5 tablespoons of dry active yeast. And then I'm going to add about 1/4 cup of honey in here. And I really just guesstimate with this. We might be getting more or less, but we're close. And finally, I'm going to add 4 cups of whole wheat flour. Now we prefer to grind our own wheat flour in our family, but we also just buy some store-bought wheat flour too. But when you grind up your own wheat, you don't have the bran and the germ all taken away from the bread and then put back in later, so you kind of get more of the really good fibrous stuff that your body needs. All right, so we will add all this in here and put on our lid, and then we're just going to mix it all together a bit. We're not really into kneading it yet, and we're just gonna let it blend and then let it sit. All right, so this is what our mixture is going to look like right now. I'm going to put on this lid just to kind of keep it warm, and I'm gonna let it start to soak up, let the flour start to soak up some of this water, and so that it can start to get more hydrated, and it'll help it kind of to proof our yeast as well. So we'll let it sit here for about 15 minutes, and then we'll move on. The recipe I'm using for my bread that I really enjoy is this Tasajara bread book. It is a fantastic book and I highly recommend it. They've got a lot of different recipes, what from starter doughs and sourdough breads to baked breads and other fun things. So check it out. Oh, and this is not a paid advertisement by any means, because those mean very little, don't they? Okay, after about 15 minutes in my semi-warm kitchen, you can see we've got quite a few bubbles and things are starting to look a bit spongy here in our dough. So next I'm going to take 4 teaspoons of salt and add it to our mixture. All right. And then we'll add in 1/3 cup of flavorless oil. And then we're finally gonna add the rest of our flour to the mixture. So I've got 4 cups of flour we need to add here. Okay, and then we're gonna give it a bit of a mix and see if we need to add more or if it's got a pretty good texture. So we'll put on our lid and get back to mixing. Right after some mixing, our dough still looks a bit wet, so I'm gonna add a bit more flour because I want it to come away from the sides a bit, but it still does need to be a fairly damp dough. So we will go one more time. As you can see, it's starting to pull away from the sides now and gather up, and that's what we want it to be doing. All right, now I've taken it out of my mixing bowl and I put it into a clean metal bowl and just kind of made sure it was clumped together nicely. I'm going to just cover it up with a cloth and let it sit here and rise for about, 45 minutes I think, and then I'll check on it, make sure it's doubled in size, and if it has doubled in size, then we're gonna move on to the next step. All right, while we're waiting for the bread to rise, maybe about 5 minutes before it's about ready, I try to oil up some pans. And what I'll do is I just try to get all the sides with some oil. So I just kind of rotate it around, get up this side, and up this side. And just make sure it's all completely oiled really well to make sure that that my bread doesn't stick and it comes out of my pan easier. And I'll do that with my second one, and then once our bread is done rising, we will put it in here. All right, now our bread has doubled in size and we're ready to put it into our bread pan. So first what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna punch it all down. Make sure to get out a little bit of excess air. You don't really have to push down the wheat flour as much as you do for a white flour, simply because all of the good fibers and things that are in here don't allow it to rise as much as a white bread would. Now I'm dividing it in half. You can see I've got a really good gluten content here. I'm trying to rip it apart. And then we gotta form it and get it into our pans. Okay, so I'm taking my bread and I'm just gonna try to get it somewhat of a loaf shape like this and get it into my pan like so. All right, and we'll do the same with the second one. We'll get it in like this. Get it in a loaf shape. I'm not doing anything too fancy. We normally just use this bread for our sandwich bread and toast, and so it's nothing that needs to be like really, you know, dolled up like it's as a gift. Okay, then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take these pans and I'm just gonna stick them over here on my stove right now. It's pretty warm. And I'm gonna cover them up with a cloth here. And we're just gonna let it sit like that for about 30 minutes until we can see that it's risen up over the cloth like this and we've got some shape, and then we'll put it into our oven. So before we walk away from it, we're going to set our oven to 350 Fahrenheit or 180 Celsius, and then we'll set our timer and we'll be done. All right, so as you can see, our bread has risen above the rim of the pan, and we've taken off our towel and gotten it into our preheated oven. And we're gonna have it in there for about 30 minutes and then we'll check on it again. All right, our bread has gone off in the buzzer and we're gonna pull it out of the oven now. So you can see it's risen a bit more since it was in the oven. All right, and here we have our beautiful bread at the end of the day. I'm going to just let these cool in the pan for just a couple of minutes so they can kind of release from the pan a little bit, and then I'll put them on the cooling rack so they can cool the rest of the way. And then once they're cool enough to handle, we'll cut them up and eat them.